Captain Marcus Reed had seen enough diplomatic functions to know when something was about to go sideways. The tension in the air of Station Nexus was thick enough to cut with a plasma blade, and every human in the ceremonial hall seemed to be walking on glass. But it wasn't the usual pre-negotiation jitters that had his instincts. Screaming danger, it was her. Serafina Valdris stood at the center of the alien delegation like a living constellation. Her skin held an opalescent quality that shifted between silver and deep blue depending on the angle of light, and her hair moved as if suspended in water despite the station's artificial gravity. She was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at directly, like staring into a star. But what struck Marcus most wasn't her otherworldly appearance. It was the careful distance everyone maintained around her. Remember, Admiral Hayes had briefed them earlier, his weathered face grave with concern. Under no circumstances does anyone make physical contact with their diplomat. Their species considers it the highest form of violation. One wrong move and these peace talks are over before they begin. Marcus watched as even her own people kept a respectful buffer zone, their movements choreographed to avoid accidental contact. When she walked, others stepped aside. When she gestured, hands moved away. It was like watching someone navigate through a world made of thorns. The ceremony proceeded with mechanical precision. Speeches were made, treaties were referenced, and hope was cautiously expressed for the future of human-Valderay relations. Marcus found his attention drifting between security protocols and stolen glances at Serafina. There was something almost tragic about her isolation, even among her own kind. Then the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in milliseconds later, bathing everything in red, but those seconds of darkness had been enough. Shouts erupted from multiple directions as the station's defensive systems engaged. Through his earpiece, Marcus heard the words that made his blood freeze. Hostile ships detected. Raider vessels approaching fast. The ceremonial hall erupted into controlled chaos as both delegations moved toward their designated evacuation routes. Marcus's training kicked in, his hand automatically reaching for his sidearm as he began shepherding civilians toward the nearest emergency exit. Through the crowd, he caught sight of Serafina being guided by her security detail, their formation maintaining that strange bubble of empty space around her, even in crisis. A massive impact shook the station, throwing people to the deck. Emergency. Klaxons wailed as sections began sealing themselves off. Marcus pulled himself up, scanning for injured civilians. When he saw her, Serafina had been separated from her guards in the confusion and was struggling to stand, her flowing robes tangled around her legs. Without thinking, Marcus rushed toward her. The rational part of his brain screamed warnings about diplomatic incidents and species taboos, but his soldier's instincts overrode everything else. Someone needed help, and he was trained to provide it. Stay back. One of her remaining guards shouted in accented English, raising a weapon that hummed with energy. Do not approach. But Seraphine's eyes locked onto Marcus's, and something passed between them, a moment of perfect understanding that transcended species and protocol. As another explosion rocked the station and debris began falling from the ceiling, she did something that made every alien in the vicinity gasp in horror. She reached out her hand toward him. Please, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in his chest. Help me. The taboo that had governed her entire existence crumbled in that single gesture. Marcus didn't hesitate. He grasped her outstretched hand, feeling an electric tingle race up his arm, and pulled her to safety, just as a support beam crashed down where she'd been standing. Around them, the shocked silence of the Valderay delegation spoke louder than any alarm. Human hands had touched the untouchable. Guardian, and somehow, the galaxy hadn't ended. Not yet, anyway. Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the medical bay's bioscanner. her heart still racing from the chaos in the ceremonial hall. As the station's chief xenobiologist, she'd been summoned immediately after the incident, though nobody seemed willing to call it what it really was: the complete shattering of the most fundamental taboo in Valderies society. "Status report," barked Security Chief Kieran Ashworth as he strode into the sterile white chamber, his tactical gear still smoking from the raider engagement. His dark eyes were sharp with concern, not for the diplomatic crisis, but for the man lying unconscious on the medical table. "Captain Reed is stable," Helena replied, checking her readings for the third time. "But Kieran, his neural patterns are ... different. Ever since he touched her, his brain activity has increased by 30%. It's like his neurons are firing in patterns I've never seen before." Kieran moved closer to examine Marcus, his friend and fellow officer who'd risked everything to save an alien diplomat. "Different how? Is he dying?" "That's just it. I don't think so. If anything, his cellular regeneration has accelerated. Look at this." Elena pulled up a holographic display showing microscopic imagery. "These are his blood cells from this morning, and these are from an hour ago. The improvement in cellular cohesion is remarkable." A soft chime indicated someone requesting entry. Kieran's hand moved instinctively to his weapon as Ambassador Thorne, Seraphine's chief aide, glided into the medical bay. The Valderies crystalline features were etched with what Elena had learned to recognize as deep distress. "How is he?" Thorne asked, his voice carrying the same harmonic quality as Seraphine's, though less pronounced. "You tell me," Kieran replied, coldly. "Your people have been screaming about contamination and violation for the past 2 hours. What exactly happens to humans who touch your precious diplomat?" Thorne's luminescent eyes dimmed with something that might have been shame. "You misunderstand the nature of our concern, Chief Ashworth. We do not fear contamination of Lady Seraphina. We fear for your Captain Reed." Elena straightened, her scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic protocol. "What aren't you telling?" "You? Our species evolved on a world where touch carries ... consequences," Thorne explained haltingly. "Lady Seraphina is what you might call a conduit. Her nervous system operates on frequencies that can overwhelm other beings. The taboo exists not to protect her, but to protect others from her." "From her what?" Kieran demanded. "Her gift, or curse, depending on perspective." Thorne approached the medical table, careful not to get too close to Marcus. "She can share consciousness, memories, emotions, even life force itself. But the human nervous system was never designed to handle such input. Previous contact with other species has resulted in permanent changes." Elena felt her blood chill. "What kind of changes?" "Enhanced cognitive abilities, yes, but also psychological instability. The mind expands beyond its normal parameters, and sometimes ... breaks." Thorne's voice carried centuries of regret. "Lady Seraphina has lived in isolation precisely to prevent such tragedies." Kieran's jaw tightened. "So you're saying Marcus is going to go insane?" "Not necessarily," Thorne said quickly. "There are variables we don't understand. The contact was brief, and your Captain Reed's mental fortitude appears exceptional. But he will be changed. The question is whether that change will enhance him or destroy him." Elena checked her monitors again, noting Marcus's continued neural evolution. "There's something else. His brainwaves are synchronizing with patterns I detected from Seraphina during the evacuation. It's almost like they're still connected somehow. That is unprecedented," Thorne whispered. "In our recorded history, no being has ever maintained a psychic link with Lady Seraphina after initial contact. They either die, go mad, or lose the connection entirely within hours." A soft groan from the medical table interrupted their conversation. Marcus's eyes fluttered open, but instead of their usual brown, They now held flecks of the same silver that characterized Valkyrie irises. "Where is she?" he asked, his voice carrying an odd harmonic undertone. "I can feel her fear." "She thinks she's poisoned me." Kieran exchanged glances with Elena. "Marcus, how do you feel?" "Different," Marcus replied, sitting up with fluid grace that seemed uncharacteristic. "Like I've been sleeping my whole life and just woke up. I can hear ... colors, feel thoughts that aren't mine." He looked directly at Thorn. "She's blaming herself, isn't she? Seraphina. She thinks touching me was a mistake." Thorn stepped back, his crystalline features shifting with shock. "This is impossible. The connection should be fading, not strengthening." Elena's instruments began registering. Energy spikes as Marcus stood. "Tell her," he said, his silver-flecked eyes intense with purpose, "that I don't regret it. Whatever this is, whatever I'm becoming, I chose to help her. And I'd choose it again." The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. If Marcus could maintain a psychic connection with Seraphina, if he could survive the mental enhancement that had destroyed others, then everything they thought they knew about human Valkyrie compatibility was wrong. And that changed everything. Zara Chun Okafor had built her reputation on making impossible decisions under pressure, but nothing had prepared her for this. Hidden in the abandoned mining section of Station Nexus, her rebel cell watched the feeds from the diplomatic disaster with growing alarm. The peace talks hadn't just failed, they'd exploded into something far more dangerous. "The Valkyrie Council is demanding Reed's immediate quarantine," reported her lieutenant, Devon Park, scrolling through intercepted communications. "They're calling him compromised and want him transferred to their ship for what they're calling purification protocols." Zara's augmented eye, a relic from her days as a corporate saboteur, zoomed in on the medical bay feeds. She watched Marcus Reed move with newfound grace, his eyes reflecting an inner light that definitely wasn't human. "And the humans?" "Admiral Hayes is stalling, but he's under pressure from Earth Command. They want Reed studied, not handed over. To aliens." Devon paused, highlighting another message. "There's chatter about using him as leverage in the negotiations. So both sides want to turn him into a lab rat." Zara stood, her scarred hands clenching into fists. She'd seen enough exploitation in her 30 years to recognize it instantly. What about the woman, Seraphina? Under heavy guard in the Valkyrie section. But here's where it gets interesting. Devon pulled up a different feed, showing energy readings from the diplomatic wing. She's not eating, not sleeping. Her biosignature shows extreme distress. And get this, every time reads vital signs. Spike hers do too. Zara studied the synchronized patterns with growing fascination. As a child of the outer colonies, she'd grown up on stories, ancient tales of star-crossed lovers and bonds that transcended species. Most people dismissed them as primitive mythology, but Zara had learned that myths often contained uncomfortable truths. "Pull up everything you can find about Valkyrie folklore," she ordered. "Pre-contact stuff. Archaeological records, cultural, anthropology reports, anything the diplomats might have missed." Her fingers danced across holographic interfaces as she accessed black market databases. Within minutes, she'd assembled a collection of fragmentary translations and ancient texts that painted a very different picture of Valkyrie society. "Devon, look at this." She highlighted a passage from a pre-space Valkyrie religious text. It talks about the bridge toucher, someone from another world who would break the isolation and wake the sleeping fire. The translation is rough, but it suggests this was prophesied, not feared. "You think Reed is some kind of chosen one?" Devon asked skeptically. "I think the Valkyrie government has been lying to their own people." Zara pulled up more documents, cross-referencing historical patterns. "Look at the timeline. They've had this no-touch taboo for exactly 300 years, right around the time they developed space travel and started encountering other species. Before that, touch was considered sacred among their kind. The implications crystallized in her mind with terrifying clarity. They didn't develop the taboo to protect others from Seraphon's abilities. They developed it to control her, to keep her isolated and dependent on their guidance. Devon whistled low. Political control through manufactured religious doctrine. Classic authoritarian playbook. And now someone's broken their control, and they're panicking. Zara began pulling up station schematics, her mind already formulating a plan that would likely get them all killed. The question is, do we let them reassert control, or do we give Reed and Seraphina a chance to choose their own fate? Her encrypted communicator buzzed with an incoming message from an unexpected source, Ambassador Thorne. The text was brief, but loaded with meaning. Traditional faction seeks audience. Ancient ways remember what modern politics forgot. Maintenance. Shaft 7, Sublevel 3. Come alone. Zara grinned, the expression transforming her scarred features into something predatory. Devon, prep the ship for emergency departure. If this goes sideways, we might need to run fast. Where are you going? To meet someone who might actually tell me the truth. The maintenance shaft was a forgotten corner of the station, filled with humming conduits and recycling air. Thorne waited in the shadows, his crystalline features dim with exhaustion. You know, don't you? He said without preamble. You've discovered what we've hidden, that your people have been lying about. The touch taboo? That Seraphina isn't dangerous, she's powerful, and your government doesn't want her to know it? Zara stepped closer, her hand resting on the plasma pistol at her hip. Yeah, I figured it out. Lady Seraphina is the last of her genetic line. Thorne whispered. Her abilities aren't just enhanced, they're evolutionary. She represents what our species could become if we weren't constrained by fear and political manipulation. And Reed is the first being in 3 centuries capable of surviving connection with her true power. Together, they could unlock potentials that terrify both our governments. Thorne's eyes flared with desperate hope, but only if they're allowed to explore this bond freely. Zara felt the weight of choice settling on her shoulders. Save 2 individuals can potentially trigger an interstellar incident, or let them be dissected by scared politicians. For a rebel who'd spent her life fighting systems of control, it wasn't really a choice at all. Tell me everything, she said, and then tell me how we get them out of here. Professor James Liu had spent 40 years studying dead civilizations. So when living history walked into his cluttered office aboard Station Nexus, he nearly dropped his coffee. Captain Nina Rodriguez, her pilot's uniform still bearing scorch. Marks from the raider attack, slammed a data pad onto his desk with the kind of authority that came from flying through impossible situations and surviving. Professor, I need you to tell me if I'm about to commit treason or save the galaxy, she said without preamble, her dark eyes blazing with determination. James adjusted his glasses, noting the stress lines around Nina's eyes. As the station's chief historical consultant, he'd worked with her before on archaeological missions, but he'd never seen her this rattled. That's quite a range of possibilities, Captain. What exactly? Reed and the Valderie diplomat. Everyone's treating this like some kind of contamination event, but I've been monitoring communications between their respective fleets. Nina activated the data pad, showing intercepted transmissions. Both sides are mobilizing warships. Not for evacuation for battle. They're preparing to fight over 2 people who touched hands. James leaned back in his chair, his academic mind immediately recognizing the pattern. You think there's historical precedent. I think everyone's missing something crucial about why this contact is so significant. Nina pulled up another file-grainy footage from the ceremonial hall. Look at this moment, right when Reed grabbed her hand. Watch the energy readings. The holographic display showed Marcus reaching for Seraphina, their hands connecting in a brief clasp. But James's trained eye caught something else, the reaction of the other Valkyrie. It wasn't horror or disgust on their faces, it was awe. Fascinating, James murmured, zooming in on individual expressions. They're not looking at a violation. They're looking at recognition? That's what I thought too. Professor, I need you to dig deep. Not the sanitized diplomatic briefings or the cultural exchange materials. I need the real history, the stuff both governments don't want us to find. James's fingers flew across his research interfaces, accessing databases that most people didn't even know existed. As a xenoarchaeologist, he had clearance to study materials that were considered too sensitive for general distribution. Within minutes, he was pulling up fragments that made his breath catch. My God, he whispered, staring at a translation from an ancient Valkyrie stone tablet. Nina, look at this. It's from their pre-space flight era, carved in their oldest known temple. The text materialized in glowing letters. When the Star Wanderer extends his hand to the light bearer, the two peoples shall become one. The barriers between worlds shall fall, and understanding shall bridge the void. Nina leaned closer, her pilot's instincts for navigation making her trace patterns others might miss. Star Wanderer. That could refer to space travelers humans. And Lightbearer? Has to be Seraphina, or someone like her. James pulled up more fragments, assembling a picture that grew more startling with each piece. Nina, this isn't a first contact situation. This is the fulfillment of a prophecy that's thousands of years old. The implications hit them simultaneously. The no-touch taboo, Nina said slowly. It wasn't created to prevent contamination. It was created to prevent this specific contact from happening. Both governments knew, James confirmed, his voice heavy with the weight of conspiracy. The humans and the Valkyrie leadership, they've been actively suppressing a prophetic tradition that speaks of unity between our species. Nina's communicator buzzed with an urgent message from her flight crew. She scanned it quickly, her expression growing grim. Professor, we've got maybe an hour before the shooting starts. Admiral Hayes just received orders from Earth Command to secure Reed at any cost. The Valkyrie fleet is moving into attack formation. They're going to destroy the station to prevent the prophecy from completing itself, James realized with horror. Thousands of people will die to maintain political control. Not if I can help it. Nina was already moving toward the door. I need you to compile everything, every fragment, every translation, every piece of evidence that shows this connection is meant to happen. Can you do that? Yes, but Nina, where are you going? She paused at the threshold, her expression hardening, into the look of someone who'd made an irreversible decision. To prep my ship. If both governments want to play gods with destiny, they can do it without using my friends as pawns. James watched her leave, then turned back to his research with renewed urgency. As he compiled centuries of suppressed history, one fragment caught his attention, a final line from the ancient prophecy that made his hands shake. And in their joining, the children of two worlds shall inherit the stars. The professor looked at the chronometer on his wall. 53 minutes until the fleets opened fire. 53 minutes to preserve the evidence that might justify everything Nina was about to do. He began typing faster than he had in decades, racing against time and politics to save a love story that was older than human spaceflight. Outside his window, the first wave of warships began moving into position, their weapons charging with the cold light of impending violence. The stolen maintenance transport shuddered as it approached the neutral zone between the human and Valkyrie fleets, both armadas bristling with enough firepower to reduce Station Nexus to cosmic dust. Captain Nina Rodriguez's hands remained steady on the controls despite the impossible odds, while behind her, the most unlikely rescue team in galactic history prepared for what might be their final mission. Marcus Reed sat beside Serafina in the transport's cramped passenger compartment, their hands intertwined despite the chaos around them. The psychic connection that had terrified both governments now served as their anchor through their bond. They could feel each other's thoughts, fears, and unwavering determination. "Zara, status report," Nina called to the rebel leader, who was monitoring fleet communications from the co-pilot's seat. "Both sides are holding position, but barely," Zara replied, her scarred features tense with concentration. "Admiral Hayes is demanding our immediate surrender, and the Valderie Council is threatening to open fire if we don't hand over Serafina for purification." Dr. Elena Vasquez looked up from her portable medical scanner, her readings confirming what they all suspected. The neural synchronization between Marcus and Serafina is accelerating. Their brain patterns are creating harmonics I've never seen before. It's like they're becoming a new form of consciousness. Professor Liu, clutching his research data like a lifeline, leaned forward urgently. "That's exactly what the prophecies describe. Nina, we need to broadcast this information to both fleets. If they understand what's really happening, understanding isn't the problem, Security Chief." Kieran Ashworth interrupted grimly. He was monitoring tactical displays that showed weapon systems powering up across dozens of ships. "Fear is, both governments are terrified of losing control over their populations. A successful human Valderie bond threatens everything they've built their power on." Ambassador Thorne, the sole Valderie who had chosen to support them, spoke. With quiet desperation, "Lady Serafina, perhaps if you severed the connection voluntarily." "No," Serafina said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated through the transport's hull. Her opalescent skin was glowing brighter now, responding to the emotional intensity of the moment. "I have lived in isolation for 27 years, told that my touch would destroy others. Marcus has shown me that connection brings life, not death. I will not return to that prison." Marcus squeezed her hand, feeling her resolve strengthen his own. Through their bond, he could sense the fear and loneliness that had defined her existence, and the brilliant hope that their connection represented. "The prophecy Liu found isn't just about us," he said, his enhanced awareness allowing him to see patterns the others missed. "It's about proving that understanding between species is possible, that cooperation is stronger than fear." Alarms blared as proximity sensors detected incoming fighters from both fleets. Nina cursed, pushing the transport's engines to their limits as energy bolts began streaking past their hull. "They're not trying to capture us anymore," Zara observed with grim satisfaction. "They're trying to eliminate the evidence." "Then we give them evidence they can't ignore," Alana declared, making a decision that would change everything. She activated the transport's communication array, broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is Dr. Elena Vasquez, Station Nexus Medical Division. I'm transmitting real-time biological data from the human Valderie neural bond." On screens throughout both fleets, the synchronized brain patterns of Marcus and Serafina appeared not as contamination or violation, but as harmony. The readings showed enhanced cognitive function, improved emotional stability, and most remarkably, the gradual emergence of entirely new neural pathways that neither species possessed alone. Professor Liu seized the moment, broadcasting his historical findings alongside Elena's medical data. "All ships, all crews, this connection was prophesied thousands of years before either of our species achieved spaceflight. Your own ancient texts describe this bond as the key to cosmic understanding. The effect was immediate and profound." Across the human fleet, communications officers began questioning orders as they absorbed the scientific evidence. On Valderie, ships, traditional faction members who had been suppressed for centuries, found their voices, demanding that their leaders honor the ancient prophecies. But the shooting hadn't stopped. Hardline elements in both fleets continued their attack, determined to destroy what they couldn't control. As energy bolts converged on their position, Marcus and Serafina looked into each other's eyes and made a choice that transcended species loyalty. Together, they opened their bond completely, allowing their combined consciousness to expand beyond the confines of the transport. What happened next defied every law of physics known to either civilization. A wave of pure understanding emanated from their joined minds, washing over both fleets simultaneously. Every human and Valderay within range suddenly experienced what the other species felt: their fears, hopes, dreams, and the fundamental sameness that lay beneath surface differences. The shooting stopped as tears began flowing on ships throughout both armadas. Admiral Hayes, feeling Valderay grief for their centuries of imposed isolation, ordered a ceasefire. The Valderay Council, experiencing human determination and compassion, through the psychic wave, stood down their weapons. In the sudden silence of space, Marcus and Serafina collapsed into each other's arms, their energy spent, but their bond stronger than ever. "Status report," Nina asked quietly, hardly daring to believe what her sensors were telling her. "Both fleets are requesting permission to dock with Station Nexus," Zara reported, wonder evident in her voice. "They want to talk." As they limped back toward the station, Professor Liu compiled his final report on the day two people holding hands had prevented an interstellar war. The last line would become famous throughout human and Valderay space. "Love, it seems, is indeed the bridge between worlds." Behind them, former enemies began the slow process of learning to understand each other, guided by the impossible bond between a human soldier and an alien diplomat who had dared to touch. The galaxy would never be the same.